Today we're going to dig a little further into the provenance affidavits from Bob Levine and James Tappy Wright, because I have a friend who's contacted me who knew them very well and has a story to tell. What's more, Paul Davids has finally taken down his video of his visit to London to meet Miles Porton and the alleged Monterey guitar. So I hope we can expect another video to take its place soon. And I hope Paul will be confirming what I've been saying all along. I know I've probably made some people mad at me over this story, particularly the current owner of the guitar, and it seems the store in London where Paul went to visit the guitar. I went there on Monday with my buddies Henning and Adam, and they had locked the door and wouldn't let us in. I just wanted to apologise for any negative press they might have got from my story. It wasn't their fault. Oh well, they missed out on that. Despite any upset, I've also made some very good and interesting friends during this investigation. One such friend is Brian from Florida. He's very firmly connected with Hendrix manager Bob Levine and also James Tappy Wright, Jimmy's roadie and tour manager. What he has to say about the provenance affidavit documentation is extremely illuminating. Brian has sent this story to me as he really wants to help dissolve the myth that this current guitar is the Monterey Strat. He is totally certain that I'm on the right track with this investigation, so he wrote to me at length to give his story. Let's hear what he has to say.
I live in Florida, USA, and started researching Jimmy's death when I first heard Tappy's admission in 2009. I contacted Tappy and Bob in 2011, and was close to them for the last 5 years of their lives. They were only 4 and 5 hours away. I even stayed over at Bob's house. I was the only person to ever visit him, for the 2 years he was in a nursing home. I knew those two well enough, that I would strongly suspect this was a scam, cooked up by one or both. More likely with Tappy as the instigator. The more I think of this, the more it becomes apparent, that this guitar was selected with black paint and a rosewood neck, because it was intended to look like the Monterey Strat, and be passed off as a counterfeit. I would strongly suspect the Bob Levine part of the provenance is fabricated, and the guitar originates from Tappy Wright. Bob never mentioned it to me. And from knowing Bob, he was not a person who would sit on a guitar of that value for decades. I had lengthy conversations with Tappy Wright, about Hendrix guitars he had access to. He even told me about obtaining the white Gibson SG, that Jimmy played on the Cavett show, and getting it proven to be real. But it just dawned on me that in my conversations with Tappy, he never once mentioned anything about this Monterey guitar, or its possession by Bob Levine. I had hours and hours of phone conversations with Tappy, calling him at least once a week for 5 years. We discussed at length the subject of Jimmy's guitars, and his insider access to them. Never once did Tappy ever mention this guitar to me, or any of this alleged provenance. Here is Bob and myself, 5 months before his death, at his Palm Coast, Florida nursing home.
So as we can see, Brian was very close to Bob and Tappy Wright. Neither ever mentioned the Monterey guitar to him, despite the many conversations they had. However, the story gets much more concerning.
This current fraud can be exposed by simple common sense. If Michael Jeffrey really sent one of Jimmy's most famous guitars to Bob Levine, there would be some mention of it in Bob's history. Wise persons will realize, the fact there is no mention of this famous guitar from Bob, prior to this later year fantastic claim, shows it is a fraud. All considered, it should be questioned if this whole thing was cooked up by Tappy, in order to establish provenance outside himself. Without accusing him directly, it is pretty obvious that once famous guitars like the Woodstock Stratocaster started selling for hundreds of thousands, it burned on Tappy how much access he had to Jimmy's guitars back then, and how he missed the opportunity to score one of them. Tappy was most likely informed that the Monterey guitar was still unlocated by collectors, who came to him and asked him if he knew anything about it, so he knew what to look for. With what we know about the current guitar's proven misidentity, we can therefore assume a correct period black Strat with rosewood neck was sought, in order to perpetrate the fraud, and all it needed was sincere validation by Bob and Tappy, and it was good to go. The reason you won't find any mention of this guitar prior to the 2000s, is because that was when it first appeared, which tells you all you need to know. The real Monterey guitar suffered an unknown fate.
So it seems that Tappy Wright was somewhat of a strange character. It seems that Tappy may well have been the originator of the guitar in question. Let's hear a little more from Brian.
There are 3 different stories for the provenance. The first one saying Jeffrey sent it to Bob Levine. The next has it at the ANIM office, which was in London, where Tappy is the first to get it. And the last has Bob getting it directly from Jimmy. Music Radar 2016. Back home in London again, the Monterey Strat took pride of place in an exhibition on rock revolutionaries. Before it disappeared behind glass once more, we were offered the chance to examine this iconic Strat up close, at the Groucho Club by its British owner, a lifelong Hendrix buff and guitar collector, who wishes to be identified only by his first name, Justin. Justin bought the guitar from Jimmy's US manager Bob Levine, who had it in his keeping for many years, after it was sent to him by Mike Jeffrey, Hendrix's manager, following Jimmy's death. Levine later sold it to a private collector, and provided a notarized affidavit, attesting to the guitar's identity. It was from this collector, that Justin eventually bought the Strat, after years of storage out of the public eye. EMP's curators also conducted a thorough survey of the instrument, before it went on show in Seattle, and Fender's own experts, have also forensically examined the guitar. Ground Guitar Website 2020. According to the official info, the Strat was given to Jimmy's record company, ANIM Limited at some point, where it fell into the hands of James, Tappy, Wright, Hendrix road manager. The guitar remained in Tappy's hands until 2012. Guitar.com 2021. Signed affidavits from Hendrix's manager, Bob Levine, who got the guitar from him, and the roadie and UK manager, James Tappy Wright, who transported the guitar, with matching serial numbers. There is a letter from Fender, to the auction house, saying they have no doubt this guitar is the Monterey Strat, concluded after an extensive inspection, by master builders George Flanda, Scott Buell, and custom shop vice president Mike Lewis.
So why would there be 3 different stories about the origination of this guitar? Surely it would be clear if Mike Jeffrey had it, or Tappy had it, or it went direct to Bob Levine. I'm also very concerned about the fact that Fender seemed to have verified it, with the head of the custom shop being adamant about it being the Monterey guitar. I'm digging into that at the moment and will provide answers as I discover them. Brian finally provides a very clear idea that Tappy is behind the guitar.
Mike, in November 2012 I returned from a research trip to New York, where I met and videoed Dr. Bannister. I told Tappy I intended to stop at Bob Levine's on the drive back to Florida, and lo and behold, when I did so, Tappy was there at Bob's. I was tired from driving all day and Bob invited me to stay over, but Tappy intervened, and told me to go. I was good friends with Tappy, and that was the only time he ever treated me that way, and I could never figure it out. And now I see late November 2012, was the exact time that guitar first went up for auction. Mike, I wonder what Tappy was so worried about, that he drove to Bob's to be there? What was he worried that Bob might tell me? Tappy, who never visited Bob any other time than that one time I spoke of, said to me that he had papers for Bob to sign, and that was why he came there. It is incredible that it is now dawning on me, that I almost certainly witnessed Tappy getting Bob to sign off on that provenance, and that was why Tappy was so itchy to get rid of me. I admit this isn't proof, but it should be checked, to see when that provenance was signed. The photo you see of Tappy, myself, and Bob was taken because I pleaded to Tappy after his brusque rebuke, that I had to at least get a photo. I also got a 10-minute video of Tappy and Bob discussing their infamous disagreement, over his murder claim, and their subsequent making up. Realize it is only until this very moment, that I now comprehend the possible context of why I was asked to leave by Tappy, and its extreme significance. When I left I thought to myself, Tappy was up to something, and there was some reason why I was disinvited. I wasn't happy about it, but I still had much research to do with Tappy, and did not want to upset our otherwise amicable relationship, which turned out to be a very wise move, considering what I later got. I now have a whole new outlook on what I witnessed that night, that forces me to come forward. I'll leave it up to others, to consider how on that visit, to the best of my memory, I do not remember Tappy or Bob ever mentioning themselves being involved in the sale of the Monterey guitar, at that time.
It does seem that Tappy was up to something. Obviously, that could well have been the moment that Tappy got Bob to sign off on the guitar. This is all very strange behaviour, explained by somebody that knew all parties involved very well. It does make me question the affidavits. Brian had no reason to contact me other than his concerns about the guitar and that the Monterey guitar might be a fraud. I will keep digging into the Fender connection. I'll also try to get further with the current owner. We will get to the bottom of this somehow. Let me know in the comment section what your thoughts are, especially on this revelation over the provenance from Bob and Tappy Wright. I'll be back with more as soon as I have more to tell. The next in the video series will cover what I think happened to the Monterey guitar, and I'll see you then. In the meantime, you guys take good care.